Lizzie. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. It's good to be here. Of
It's nice to have you. I appreciate you being here. And
course, yeah.
for anybody watching, my name is Kealy Spring. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. It's a mouthful in the state of California. And starting to do these interviews is a way to kind of pull back the curtains on what it is like to be a therapist and hopefully kind of humanize us a little bit more for everybody.
Mhm.
And today, Lizzie is here with me. This is actually kind of exciting because for a couple reasons. One, I actually am just meeting Lizzie. So I'm going to learn all about Lizzie today with everybody else.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm excited.
Great.
Um,
So, Lizzie, could you take a minute just to introduce yourself and to, kind of share who you are and kind of what stage you are in, which is
yeah,
probably that I'm
absolutely.
excited to talk to you because I think you're going to have an interesting perspective here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my name is Lizzie Pfeiffer. I am an associate marriage and family therapist in California. And so I have recently graduated and I'm earning my hours towards licensure and I'm working under supervision of a licensed therapist. Um, yeah, and so I'm sort of in the beginning of my career as a therapist. And I'm really, yeah, I just feel very excited and then kind of lucky to be doing this work and be in this field. Um, yeah, yeah, so
All
that's
right.
a little intro about me. Yeah.
And
Girl
so
summer.
for sure, for sure. For Lizzie, for some of those people that don't know, because you and I know the whole process and it is quite cumbersome to become a licensed therapist.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
Uh, could you explain just a little bit of the journey of what it takes to get to even where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I have my master's. I did a 2 year master's program at the Wright Institute, which is in Berkeley, California. Um, and yeah, so that was like a 2 year, education program. Yeah, like graduate program. And yeah, I just in my second year I got to kind of do I got to do a practicum, and so I was like in the doing therapy sessions for the first time in supervision, and then got to kind of bring that back to the classroom and really like have mentorship as I was like really fresh as a therapist. And then I graduated, and then I kind of went through all the the bureaucracy, but became an associate marriage and family therapist, which then is the trajectory of earning hours and experience until then you get fully licensed.
For
Um,
sure, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
It's quite the process for people
yeah,
that don't know. It is quite
yeah,
the
yeah.
process. And once Lizzie, you get all your hours, which are in
Mhm.
categories that you have to get
Yes.
specific
Mhm.
types of therapy hours.
Yeah.
As the clinician, then you can take the licensing exam, right? Once you submit your hours, they get approved, then you take the
Mhm.
licensing exam, and then theoretically you can open your own practice and go forth.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's some like, yeah, fun just like paperwork in that whole process. And yes, I've taken my like first law and ethics exam, which is kind of that like first of two exams in this process. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot of testing and a lot of things that go into this
Yeah,
along the
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So that said, Lizzie, could you share maybe your journey to how you decided to go down this path, since it is quite
Mhm.
the elaborate path to take?
Mhm.
What?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I let's see. I definitely didn't have like a direct path towards becoming a therapist. Um, so I was an English and creative writing major in undergrad, um, which actually was on the East Coast. And then that's where at the very end of college, I met my partner, and they're also a therapist. And so, like this was all sort of transpiring before and during the pandemic. And so what ended up happening is I just like moved here to California with my partner at the beginning of the pandemic. Um, and then I was kind of like floating a little bit. I was like, okay, like I made this big move like for my life, but not exactly sure where that's taking me for my career. Um, but I got to see my partner being a therapist, and I was like, wow, like this is really awesome, great work. We're similar in that we're like really deeply empathetic, like relationship oriented people. And so I was like, yeah, I can really see myself doing this and enjoying this. Um, and so then I started working a little bit in ABA, or like it's applied behavioral analysis, which is, I mean, honestly, like a little bit of a kind of controversial model of like um, behavioral therapy, often for really young kids on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum. Um, and through doing that work, what I liked was building relationships with the kiddos. And so, in having that little bit of experience, I was like, oh, I want more of this, and a kind of broader diversity of like training around what therapy looks like. And so that was my impetus to return to school. Um, yeah.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Your partner, are they licensed or are they also in the same part of the journey as you? Are you able to kind of share that experience or?
Yeah, yeah, we are. They are actually a a clinical psychologist, and they recently graduated from the Wright Institute's PsyD program. So they're the
Okay.
doctorate program.
Okay.
And so I, like witnessed that and was like, yeah, like that doctorate level doesn't quite feel right for me. Um, yeah, I was definitely just more interested in kind of a little bit more of an expedited program that focused more on like just relational therapy, like in the space, as opposed to like um, more teaching or assessment or research.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It really is kind of the two paths that diverge in terms of the PsyD versus or
yeah,
PhD versus the kind of clinical
mm-hmm.
psychologist route.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and just out of curiosity, where on the East Coast are you originally from?
I am originally from Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
I went to school in like Western Pennsylvania, which is where my parents grew up. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
yeah,
So
hmm
like proper East Coast.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was very exciting for me to kind of like find an opportunity, or kind of yeah, like be like, oh wow, I have this opportunity to be in California. Like that felt very far away and very exciting. And it was like, wow, like I really like it here. So I feel lucky.
Great. Yeah. Sometimes I meet people who are a little shell shocked because there's a very different communication style, right? That happens East Coast versus West Coast. There's different kind of
Yeah.
relational pieces that people have, and you either like it here in California or not so much.
Yeah, yeah. Um I am so familiar with that, and it's funny because I really like it here. I think I felt like, yeah, this is the vibe that I like. This is I enjoy connecting with people, and um the way I've experienced so far here. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, and you came during a challenging time to meet people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, so second question. What do you like about being a therapist? I mean, you were kind of speaking to that a little bit, but
Yeah. I uh really love building like deep relationships with people, and I think therapy is such a like unique and wonderful and kind of like precious sacred type space to be able to do that. And so I find it really like powerful to just connect with someone so deeply in this therapeutic space, and like provide a space that for a lot of clients is like unfamiliar, which is so emotionally attuning and caring and compassionate and like non-judgmental. um and so like being able to provide that kind of like unconditional positive regard, and being able to witness that feeling good to clients feels really special too. um,
mhm.
yeah, yeah.
It's kind of this warm, safe space that we
Mhm.
create in these moments for people to kind of explore
Yeah,
these deep, dark.
yeah. Yeah, and sort of being like sometimes like being a voice that is sort of um like helping a client kind of see like, oh, this is what I deserve, or this is how I can view myself, or what I can feel like I want and deserve to get.
Sure.
Kind of being that voice for a client can be, yeah, it feels so special and feels so empowering, kind of on behalf of that client too, and like
Mhm.
um, sort of in that way, like being their advocate. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it feels really special.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we as clinicians have to kind of help people advocate for themselves sometimes.
Hmm.
Really kind of help give them or help them find their voice. When,
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and I do work with like adolescents and like teenagers, and I've worked in like a school setting, and so I think then in that context specifically, there's something really cool about like um, supporting kids and youth who are like often in a sort of disempowered position or are kind of like finding themselves and finding their own sense of individuality and their voice, and being able to be a supportive like adult in that context with them, to then like freely feel that self
Yeah.
like in themselves and with their like in their relationships and with their families and at school feels really powerful too.
Yeah. Yeah. I no longer work with youth or teens just because I work mostly with adults at this point. But I remember when I was getting my hours, I love the 13, 14-year-old ages
Oh.
because they're just little sponges that are so eager to like learn and figure things out. And even if they're a little bit like chip on their shoulder or something's going on, that there's just like this clear opportunity to kind of give so much to the development of how they
Mhm.
think about things and how they process
Yeah,
things.
yeah, I really agree. I think like um, it's funny as I like started working with adolescents in my clinical work, and had this association of like, oh gosh, like middle school, like that. I think it's often such a kind of hard time, just like a hard developmental age. And I was like, oh, like that feels a little scary working with middle schoolers. And I kind of conversely found it so rewarding. And I think there is such a specialness to like the transition, like kind of the transitional age that is like between child and not not a child, more of a teen and moving into adulthood. Yeah, so there's something really tender, I think, about the how much is happening and how much is coming alive then in a therapeutic space, perhaps for
Mhm.
a for middle school aged
Yeah,
kids.
yeah, I had a very similar type take. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
and then I was like, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so are there certain modalities? I often think associates are actually some of the most well-informed. Like we all have to take continuing education units with your license and all that, but I think when you're just out of school, you really kind of have gotten the latest knowledge, the latest kind of techniques, and you're more dialed in a little bit, I think, therapeutically in some ways to kind of I don't know, trainings or I don't know
Sure. Yeah.
what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think like the sort of freshness I still have like as a therapist, like what that means for me is that um yeah, I feel a lot of like I guess like just excitement and maybe some like clarity, I think too, around like, yeah, this is the type of therapy that feels like it's really aligning with me and that like feels really good to lean into, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think in my master's program, I felt like I noticed like I didn't get a ton of like really deep or specific training around like in different like therapy modalities and theories. I got like I think a little bit more of a broad overview. And so then um when like when I did graduate and when I as I've started working as an associate, I think like my supervision spaces have been ones where I've been able to find uh, supervisors who work in a way that like really resonates with me and interests me. And so that's been really exciting. It's been like such a fruitful space for my like training and development as a therapist. Um, yeah, and so I think the way I work tends to be really like depth oriented and process oriented and very very deeply relational. Meaning that like me the way I build a relationship with my client individually in the space feels like so much of the work or the foundation of the work for me. um yeah, and then I work really kind of like psychodynamically and from like an attachment based framework,
Okay.
which to me means I get really curious about clients relationships,
Mhm.
currently and in the past, what it was like growing up with caregivers, and I think a lot about like roles and patterns, um, kind of consciously and subconsciously in clients. uh,
Mhm.
that's informing like how they experience the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a journey, and I think one of the things you said really kind of resonates because I think as we get a little bit further along in our careers, we get pigeonholed. We get like stuck in the thing we do, the
Mm-hmm.
niches that we are. And so it's
Mhm.
kind of exciting to hear you talk about all these different types of,
Mhm.
modalities and ways of viewing
Yeah, yeah.
work. Yeah.
Hmm.
And, I think clinical supervisors really impact, uh,
Hmm.
and I'm certainly biased, but I do very much enjoy one of your clinical supervisors who's been
Yeah,
such a good friend. So I think you're
yeah, yeah.
one of the best for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that's what's been, I think, somewhat unique about being in private practice where I am now is that like I I mean really just sort of chose my supervisors and chose who I wanted to work with, and then I'm working in their practices because I'm like, wow, I really like how you work. And that's been an amazing kind of like model of like mentorship and kind of development as as myself as a therapist.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is really cool. I feel very lucky to have those supervisor relationships.
For
Mm-hmm.
sure. Yeah, they make a big difference. I mean, I
Yeah,
will
yeah.
tell you, there's still things that certain supervisors said to me
Mm-hmm.
15 years ago that I'm like still telling people.
Yeah, yeah. Powerful. Yeah.
Like, if
Mm-hmm.
Chuck only knew what I was telling
Yeah.
people.
Oh.
Um, okay, so what would a typical session for you look like then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I I think I often, will like start a session and kind of invite in like what's been going on in the last week, I'll ask a client like, do you have reflections on, where we left off last week, or is there anywhere in particular that you're noticing like, oh, I really want to start here right now. Um and then I think like um I will do a lot of kind of like reflecting back what I hear from clients, in a way that is like validating and affirming of like their experience and their emotions. I will ask kind of like deepening questions, and we'll ask like questions kind of leading to, or kind of exploring like, I guess like a deeper insight into how a client is experiencing something, or what they're noticing in their self, their feelings, their relationships. Um, yeah,
Mhm.
well, I would say, I guess, like, part of that is um, sessions for me are like very conversational,
Mhm.
and very like inviting of, um, I don't know, kind of like different layers of things happening, of
Uh-huh.
content, of like how you're experiencing something in your body, of what's happening like between us in the space.
Yeah,
Um,
all the things.
yeah, kind of micro and macro ways of
Yeah,
conceptualizing just like your experiences.
yeah,
Uh, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. There's
Yeah.
always a lot going on, and it's kind of where the clinician chooses to pull, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That was interesting. What about that one?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's such a like, I mean, I've been in therapy plenty myself as a client too. And I think um I know as a client that's what's felt fun sometimes, which is when like a therapist can kind of be noticing something and I'm like, yes, thank you. Like I've been trying to kind of figure out where to go with this, or, you know, what this means to me, and having someone else to kind of be like, well, this is what I'm hearing or noticing. Um, is really cool. Yeah, and I think it can be really fruitful.
For sure, for sure. I always love when somebody comes back and they're like, that thing you said? Like, I do that a lot, don't I?
Yeah,
And you're like,
yeah.
yeah. Yep, you do. Glad we got there.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
Okay, so is there anything that surprises you about therapy? I mean, I remember when I was starting out, lots of things surprised me, quite honestly, because it's new
Yeah,
and you're kind of figuring out the whole profession and I mean, there's the business side of everything, the marketing,
yeah, yeah.
the like actual clinical work.
Hmm.
Are there things that you've noticed that kind of were surprising to you as you started this path?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely resonate with how you're framing that, which is that, or like in that, yeah, a lot is new. And so there does feel like a lot that's absolutely surprising to me. I think, um, yeah, I think like in that kind of logistical way, building a practice and kind of being a therapist in this role that is so like emotionally attuned and kind of relational, and also kind of being in this place where you're like, oh, this is like my business, and what are the kind of like business minded ways that I then have to think as well, is challenging and interesting. And I think that's always surprising to kind of witness and just experience like how that plays out, I guess. Um, let's see. I think I am very often surprised to kind of tune into myself and think about like, oh, what is coming up for me or what am I feeling with a particular client,
Mhm.
um, as a way of like understanding sometimes like like I'm holding something for like for them or alongside them that is like related to how they're experiencing the world or relationships. Um, and it like kind of it's often surprising to kind of notice that in myself, as like another way of gathering data and information.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean that's something I think so unique to this work,
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
like
Especially,
having mm-hmm,
sorry, go ahead.
internal experience that is so insightful in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed that can be particularly powerful around attachment work,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of stuff that you end up being like, wait, well, was that my stuff? Like, is that your stuff? Like, where
Yeah.
was this? How am I perpetuating this? How am I helping you pass this? What are
Uh,
we doing here?
yeah, it's so interesting. And so, yeah, it's like, in the way I work, I'm a very relational therapist. And so I think a lot and hold a lot of importance around the relationship, between myself and a client. And it's really cool to like feel how surprising that can be sometimes, or how much sometimes still goes unnoticed. And what comes up when I kind of really explore or tune in, or yeah, to kind of what's happening in myself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of information again on so many levels that goes
Yeah.
into this work, and it's about again pulling those threads. And I do think that for the clinicians I see be the most successful are the ones who pay attention to that kind of stuff and work through it and really kind of
Yeah.
it to light rather than, kind of compartmentalizing and being like, oh, that was weird.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
put it over there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's almost like a dual process that happens.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Which feels to me like, it's just such a like deep piece of this work. And I think like, um, what makes this work, challenging and really powerful. Um, like, and just like, yeah, it's very powerful to be in this role when know that like you can have a lot of influence, and that this relationship can really mean something to your clients. And um, yeah, the way we're kind of talking about like really looking in and then being intentional and making space for like, oh, what is happening in me with this client.
mhm,
um yeah, I think is one of the things that maintains this like integrity too around like, um yeah, this isn't
yeah,
isn't quite the same as like a job where I'm showing up and doing something with someone, but uh you know what yeah the like the emotions in yourself show up and are so much more present and important in therapy, I think, than in other fields.
yeah. You can't just kind of put up a wall between you and everybody and say like, I'm just going to do my task because your
Yeah,
task is
exactly. Yeah.
the actual
Yeah.
functional
Mm-hmm.
piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons too that we always have to get our own therapy,
Yeah.
when we're going through this process. It's
Yeah.
partly to make sure that we're like working through whatever might be coming up,
Yeah, exactly.
but we don't bring it into the room, and you know that we
Yeah.
kind of are always managing that push and a
Well,
pull.
yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What do you wish people knew about therapy?
Mm. Oh, that's such a good question. Um, let's see, how do I put this into words? Um, I think I like wish that um uh that people okay, let's see. I think I wish that people knew that if a therapy experience feels bad, um, that it isn't, I guess like the short way of saying this is like if a therapy experience is feeling bad, it is reflective of that individual therapist and not of therapy overall. And I feel like that there's something complex as I'm framing that, because I think that it isn't really like um, the weight of that doesn't fall on the individual, or rather like we've have so much, so much like kind of falsity. I don't even know if that's a word, but like falseness around what therapy looks like kind of in media, and there's so much stigmatizing and shame around therapy, and then it's really unfortunate how often I think it is to have someone go into therapy and just like not have a good match with a therapist, or feel like they're in a therapeutic relationship that is really not working, or like at worst like even causing some harm kind of relationally. And uh yeah, I guess I just wish the like overall image of therapy was a little more holistic, or a little bit more positive, or um
I
maybe a
totally
little bit able to be a little bit more trusted in people, if that makes sense.
I totally understand what you're saying. I actually, even on
Yeah.
my website, I have a therapist fit page because I think this is so important where, I talk to people about how I practice, but if I'm not the right person for you, here are a bunch of other colleagues I trust that
Yeah,
are also
yeah,
quite talented that you might resonate with more because
absolutely.
I do think, while there are certainly clinicians that I don't think, maybe are um, practicing in ways that are wonderful all the time. I do think I agree with you. I think that therapy as a whole, we get a bad rap in some ways and so honestly, it's part of the reason I'm doing these videos is kind of sharing
Yeah.
that, we're human and we have, we're actually pretty well trained and
Yeah.
about this stuff all the time, and we want you to get the experience out of it that you want to get out of it. It's not just us wanting you to be there. It's like, I do want my clients, patients, whatever, to thrive
Yeah.
and be a better version of themselves. And if I'm not the right person to get them there, please, by all means, like let's put you with somebody who is.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
resonate with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. And I think I'm thinking a little bit about, like what I was speaking to around how often, therapy is so pathologized, or just like made to be kind of a shameful thing or a sign of weakness. It makes me think too that like I wish for people to know about therapy that I don't know, like both being in therapy doesn't mean that, like anything's inherently wrong with you. Um, and kind of like I get what feels sort of um in relationship to that also is also that there also doesn't have to be anything wrong to be in therapy either.
Mhm.
um and that like this can be a sort of um, just like explorative, like almost uh like maintenance space
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
um
Yep.
and like a sense of coping the way that like a lot of other things would be,
Yes.
the way that we like consider like physical health too.
It's a
Yeah.
continuum, right? There's a whole spectrum here of need, and clinicians can help you with the extreme acute stuff that's,
Yeah,
and the stuff that's kind of day to day,
exactly. Yeah.
your average stuff. I call them booster sessions when people I'm working with, go away and then they come back and they'll say, like, can I get a booster session? It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
what's
yeah, that's
that?
great.
What's going on? But yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
ongoing conversation with some people.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a favorite tool or a thing that you kind of gravitate towards in your work?
Yeah, let me see. I think one thing, or like maybe the first thing that comes to mind is that like um I mean, and it's funny, like maybe both as a tool for me and a tool for my client in the space is I will sometimes kind of um, invite us to kind of pause or slow down and check in at, as my client is speaking. I will kind of really invite them to be like, well, what is happening? What are you like noticing in your physical body, or how does it feel in a more meta way, like sharing this with me? Um, and I think like, sometimes in a session when I'm kind of I find myself at a loss, or like not exactly sure where I want to continue, or how I want to respond. Like it's like that question is always a kind of, I find it always a useful place to just gather more information.
Mhm.
um and also for clients, like yeah, like often therapy is, we're like talking, and I think uh slowing down a little bit and inviting in this like other layer of like, what is this feeling like to talk about, and how am I holding this more somatically too? Um, is a really interesting place to invite in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think it's one of those areas that I see clinical work going more towards is more of that somatic work. And I know myself, it's been powerful work to do with people because
Mhm.
especially I think, we're in the Bay Area. It's very go, 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 move, 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 fast,
Yeah.
fast, fast.
Yeah.
People
Hmm.
aren't really kind of checking in with, I describe anxiety as like a buzz. Like people
Hmm.
buzzing, buzzing, buzzing. And it's like, okay, I mean, let's
Yeah.
put the
Yeah.
nervous system down. Let's notice
Mhm.
what's going on. What do you like? Are you
Yeah.
clenching your teeth? Are you, holding it in your shoulders? What are you doing here?
Yeah. Hmm.
Just kind of bringing that awareness to that somatic and the emotional side too, not just the talk part.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it
Well,
can be really powerful and just like really grounding, to especially like when we're sort of talking about something that feels intense or heavy, you're kind of activating. Um,
for sure.
yeah, yeah.
I love it. Great answer. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah.
I'm on board.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, so those were kind of more little clinical questions. We're going to dive into some more fun, just kind of understand who you are and
Awesome.
okay.
I
So,
like it.
uh, without further ado, what is something that's making you happy these days?
Arts and crafts.
Okay, what kind?
I am, very willing and open to hop on like a TikTok trend and be like, oh, I'll do, like be like playing with clay or like doing coloring or um I don't know, like things that feel very light and just it feels very fruitful to just like release this like playful creative energy.
Yeah, yeah. I love me some arts and crafts too. Full
Yeah.
disclosure, I've actually never been on TikTok, but I hear that there's a lot of like challenge. Are you talking like challenges stuff or is it
Kind
just
of, or like it seems like there's such a what feels like what does feel fun about it is the way in which it like feels like it's inspirational and people will like join in on something
okay?
and be like it'll just kind of like spread.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah, love it. Yeah. What's your favorite app?
Oh. Oh. I think currently my favorite app is it's called Finch, like the bird.
Okay.
Um, and it's kind of a like self-care, like mental health
Oh, really? I've never heard of it.
app. And you like take care of this little bird and you get to like name it and you like you get to like self-assign like tasks for yourself and they can be anything, they can be small or big, and you can kind of set the frequency and so if you do something every day you kind of it's very cute and just like wholesome
Clever
and
sounding. It's yeah.
you know yeah like that doing tasks like helps take care of your bird and like send them on little adventures and this is very very sweet.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm filling out. I've never heard of that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. What about are you beach or mountains?
I love the beach. I feel like I'm very much like a both person. But I definitely resonate with like the way in which being by the ocean and on the beach is like so calming for me. The nice, such a nice space.
The
Hmm.
waves crashing, all the
Yeah, yeah,
sounds. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Okay, what is one thing that movies never get right? Could be about any.
Therapy.
What's that?
It's a therapy.
Therapy.
Um,
Yes, I know.
I'm like
Totally.
like every time I see a therapist on screen, I mean there's been a few times where I'm like, wow, this was really well done and nice. I can't um I'm not thinking of like any particular examples, but it's often cringy to be like, oh no, like guys. I mean, and it feels like that's like a job that is kind of the like the butt of the joke in a lot of like movies where it's like funny that this therapist is kind of bad at their job or something, but it's painful to watch as a therapist.
Yes, I will not. There's one or two that I'll watch, but yeah, for that very reason, because I'm always like,
Yeah.
oh, you would never do that.
Uh,
You
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
nonsense, like couldn't happen.
yeah.
Or you would do so much damage to the
Oh,
person.
I
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. Okay, best way to relax.
Um, I love relaxing by like watching TV. I as a therapist, like love watching TV that is kind of mindless and uh
I get that.
it's kind of like absent. It has an absence of emotional depth. Um, as in, like I love watching reality TV because I think it feels like just a contrast of the a contrast from the work that I'm like the emotional and mental work that I'm doing in my job. So it's fun to come home and just be like laughing at the kind of ridiculousness of
Yeah.
substance free TV.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. Whenever anybody asks me, like, oh, this movie is about, a mother and daughter relationship, I'm like, no. Mm-mm.
Oh, yeah, like that's my everyday.
Not
Yeah.
one bit. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Okay, dream trip location.
Um, what comes to mind is Ireland. I have been there once. So like I don't know if that, I guess that I mean, I don't know. We're just
There's plenty of
doesn't kind of
places to go in Ireland.
yeah.
Are there specific places that you'd want to go back to that you didn't get to?
Um, I've only the one time I went to Ireland, I was only really in Dublin, and so I really would just love to kind of see more of the whole country and like the countryside. But the greenness and just like the beauty of the nature that I have seen there has been so gorgeous and just like very it feels very nurturing to be in.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that lush green
yeah,
coastal. Yeah.
yeah. And I like listening to people who have Irish accents. And it's like, oh yeah, it's fun to listen to. I'm like, oh, it sounds very cool.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Mm, I think I think it's interesting. I'm thinking about this kind of in the context of like my younger therapist self. Um, but I think some advice I would give to myself is like um, that like that I will and then did I guess find clients that like are the right fit, and then like when that happens you kind of like it feels right because because they stay and they return and because it feels like a good relationship. um and so I'm kind of like envisioning giving myself that relationship, or sorry, that advice um in those moments where I'm like building that sense of self and that confidence as a therapist. And sort of learning like, yeah, of course it's like with some people it isn't going to work out, and of course I can't be the right therapist for everyone. Yeah, and that's an interesting and hard learning curve sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The struggle is definitely real there. It's
Mm-hmm.
uh, very challenging to build a client practice or practice for your um, private practice. And for you, I would imagine because you have to get those hours too, you're they do that so that we get exposure to so many different,
Mm-hmm.
family unit, couple, whatever,
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
kids, as you were mentioning, right? But it can be hard then to figure out how to, that's a lot. That's a lot to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
figure
yeah,
out right fit for, I think it gets easier as trying to give you a little hope here that there it does get a little easier, I think, as you kind of narrow in on,
yeah.
who when you're not trying to get all the types of different units that you need to,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's like I've like felt that getting easier and kind of like felt into that as I've continued. Or like as I've continued to kind of build my practice. And it's just felt, yeah, it's felt really good to be like, yeah, like when it's the right fit, that's like the best of this work and it feels really good. And yeah.
It's a palpable thing. It really is one of those things, I can tell from a initial conversation if somebody's going to be a good fit nowadays.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all the things. Yep. This
Yeah.
will be a good fit.
Yeah.
Doesn't always mean that they choose me to work with, but from my perspective.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sure. Okay. A little bit funner, less deep question. Out of the four seasons, what's your favorite? What's the best?
I I think fall and autumn. Um, I don't know, like a lot of people, I love Halloween. I mean, we don't get a lot of changing leaves here, but I like changing leaves and like the crunchy fall leaves. Um, I like the kind of warm, cozy, like apple cider, pumpkin picking kind of vibes. And yeah, I think there's something cyclical about like, you know, like returning or like having fall like after summer. I don't know, like I like all the seasons, but I think there's something, yeah, particularly like in the kind of coziness of fall that
Mhm.
I just look forward to and enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what would be the worst superhero power to have?
um, oh, let's see. Um, wow, that's a good question. Well, I'm a little stumped. I'm like trying to think about like what is what is that kind of intersection of like what would be this like, you know, power bestowed on me that would for me feel like, oh gosh, like this is the last thing I want.
Yeah. Have you
I
ever
don't know.
watched?
Do you have one? Like what would yours be?
Mine would definitely be, which has actually come up with two other clinicians, which I was like not surprised too much, is mind reading.
Mind reading? Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
I do not want to know I wouldn't want people to know
Right.
everything that's on my brain. I do not want to know everything that's on theirs, you know,
Yeah.
too much
That makes
information.
sense. Yeah. Um, yeah, that resonates. I think like I'm not like I don't have kind of a fully formed thought, but I think there's something for me where it's like like the ability to like maybe like something in the ability to like speak every language instantly. I mean, like that honestly sounds great in some ways. Maybe not truly like the worst superpower, but um, yeah, there's a way in which I'm like, oh, the responsibility that carries, like,
Mhm. Yeah.
or the you'd be like, you know, constantly busy, constantly kind of like someone needing you, kind of.
Translate whatever is going
Yeah,
on, right? There's this random tribe that nobody has ever talked to, but you speak their language. Just come talk.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I feel like that's such a good question. I feel like I'll be like thinking about that more. Oh,
Have you ever watched that show, The Boys, on
I don't think so.
something? It's gotten quite grotesque in some ways because it's very, but like some of it's about superheroes that are like people have superpowers. And like, for example, like the one guy, he runs really fast, which you think like good, but like he'll run through people and like help, you
Oh
know?
gosh. Oh yeah, that's so interesting. Oh gosh. Yeah.
There's always a superpower that could go wrong, I think,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I never thought that until I watched that show and then I was like, oh,
Mhm.
no,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
wrong. Okay, what would your spirit animal be?
I think a cat.
Okay.
I have three cats. I am a big cat person. I think the like nuance of their like personality, like often of like their personality and kind of spirit, just
Mhm.
feels very. I don't know, just like resonates with me as a human, and um, yeah, like they're very like I think deep
Yeah.
animal. You like build trust with them, and they, um, I don't know, you know, I think often have kind of this like uh, uh strong sense of self, and they're like, you know, I'm doing whatever I want. I can sleep most of the day, which also sounds lovely sometimes. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big cat person. Actually, I've got two outdoor cats, but I've got I had an indoor cat who passed away last year, but he was not the typical cat. He was that type of cat that liked to play fetch. He would, cuddle with you. He just always wanted to be with you. We were always like, you're not the typical cat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know I
Like,
have a dog. I mean, I have a cat who is like that,
mhm.
and he reminds me of more of a dog, which is funny.
Yeah,
Very
totally.
sweet. Yeah.
Totally. I think cats are misunderstood. So I love that
Yeah,
answer because I love
totally. Yeah,
the
yeah.
cats and they're such little personalities, and I don't think quite
Yeah, yeah.
the extent sometimes. Some of the videos are great about cats, but
Yeah.
Uh, okay. When you look back at your life, this is final question. So when you look back at your life, what do you hope you'll be able to say?
Oh, interesting. That's a good question. Um, I think that I hope that I'll be able to really say that I um had like a lasting impact on like my loved ones and on like generations after me, kind of in my family and I guess yeah, both like in a sense of family I'm building and continuing and um, that I'm just sort of impacting more generally or more tangentially. Um, yeah, and I think I would also say like I would hope to be able to say that um, people felt from me the kind of like care and importance that I hold around like building really meaningful relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Lizzie. You are now seen. Trying out new taglines for this. I don't know. But I appreciate you taking the time and speaking
Yeah.
with me and sharing. Is there anything else before we hop off here that you'd like people to know? I will include your information on how to get a hold of you. Is there anything else that you would like to share about, clinical work or your practice?
Sure. I guess like one kind of like area of like clients and work that I do that I didn't specifically touch on is that I work a lot with queer and trans folks. Those are identities I hold, like big parts of me and big parts of my clinical work. And so like a community that feels really wonderful to be able to support. Yeah, and so I think that makes up a lot of my clients and um, yeah, is one of the things that kind of leads people to me in a way that yeah makes sense to me. Yeah, it feels like really affirming work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think is in the Bay Area, it's something that's very needed and
yeah,
highly.
absolutely.
So it's lovely to. I'm glad you shared that because that is a niche that I know people are always looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, yeah, thank you for this. This was really great to just get to meet you and chat with you. And yeah, it feels like a really wonderful opportunity to get to share a little bit more deeply or a little bit more visibly about what it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
working with a therapist or knowing me. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate it because again, you're sharing an experience of you're in the middle of this journey and, I
Mhm.
think there's a good perspective that you
Mhm.
have that I appreciate you sharing. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was so glad to be able to participate. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
Mhm.
Thanks, Lizzie.
Thank you.